So they named the baby Fareda. In the next 10 days, Lillian and Jenny cared for that baby. Every mouthful of milk was a victory, and every minute of sleep a relief. Now, as they were in this place, in this rented house, caring for this baby, then became known that, hey, you can drop your baby off at that person's house. She'll take him. It was on February 10th, 1911, that she wrote on that slip of paper and put it in her Bible the day that she moved in to that place. But as she was experiencing and just asking the Lord for wisdom on what to do, it became very clear to her that she was supposed to open an orphanage there in Asyut. As confirmation to know, God, are you really calling me to do this? A little Muslim boy around 12 years old who was a courier. He delivered messages for people in the city. He delivered her a message and just hung around the house. And in course of conversation asking, what are you doing? Why are you still here? He said, you're the lady that takes in babies. She said, yes, that's me. And he said, here. He had about 7 cents. He gave it to her. He said, you can take this to help with the babies. And she remembered in Zechariah 4, do not despise the day of small beginnings. And so with these 7 piasters, she began an orphanage. And she would, from this small beginning, it opened the door to huge possibilities. She began taking in other children, and soon, within a matter of weeks, she had 3 children she was caring for. But as they were, it wasn't all glorious. They're tending to Farida, and she's getting better. And then they take these other boys, and one of those boys, Habib, had bubonic plague, which then spread to the other children, and Lillian contracted. Both of them survived. Everybody survived. But these were tests that were just going to be small, faith-building moments for Lillian's life. There were farmers all around called fellahin, and they would donate as part of their produce to the orphanage because they all knew what Lillian was doing. But they didn't want to come bring it to her. She had to go get it from them, and so she realized, there's a bunch of donkeys around here. I'll hire one of those. Ended up buying one of them, and she would ride a donkey out to the fields, load up all that she could, bring it back to the orphanage, and she would make several trips throughout the day, every day on the donkey. She became known as the woman on the donkey. And all the farmers would look for her and see her coming, and she would just gather the provisions for the orphanage. And as the orphanage is growing, she has around 50 kids now, which is not, the house that they're in can't contain them. It was just all beds, all cribs everywhere. She said they really need another place to really build an orphanage that would give them space. And somebody told her about some land that was across the Nile in Asyut, a land across the Nile that she could use, she could buy. I think it started at half an acre, but it had room on either side to expand in future time. So she said, go tell the man I want it, and I'll have the money a week from today. She thought, all right, how am I going to get the money? But she also remembered that a man who had visited a few days before said, if there's anything I can do, just please let me know. She visited him and told him about the land that was there, and it was $50, and he said, or 50 pounds. He said, okay, here, take the 50 pounds, go buy it. And as she was, as she's is enjoying the fact that she gets to build this, she's always looking for more confirmation. But she needed to keep the prices down in order to build, and so she said, I know what I can do. I can have the boys make the bricks. So she bought 6 brick forms, and they would continue to build. Just every day, accumulating, making more and more bricks. But think about it. It's the same thing that the Israelites did for Pharaoh. God's people making bricks. But Pharaoh had God's people making bricks for his own glory, but now these bricks are being made for God's glory. as things were moving forward and buildings end up getting built around. Lillian returned from the brick making at the new place to the house that she was renting and noticed a man who was standing at the gate of the house, and she recognized that man. She saw something familiar about him, only to find out that it was Farida's father, and he was coming to take her away from the orphanage. Lillian was completely distraught. She cried and cried and cried, only a few weeks later to find out that Farida had died. God used this to say she wants, she went from this little girl being happy in the orphanage to now dead. It was too much for Lillian, but she kept on moving on. In 1916, the orphanage building was completed. Now she had 50 orphans and 8 widows in her care. The widows usually were blind and they couldn't hold jobs, so she would have them cook and clean and do what they could around the house. And all the children, everybody had their chores, and everybody did their chores in their daily routine. In 1918, Jenny Trasher, Lillian's sister, finally left to return to the United States. What she had promised to stay a few months ended up being 8 years that she was with Lillian. Now it's World War I time, and the British came to occupy Egypt in promise of protecting the Suez Canal. So as the war is coming to an end, the Egyptians want the British to leave. The British are staying, and the Egyptian men begin to riot. They begin to attack any foreigner. One night, she saw from where she was, she saw the men crossing the bridge near the orphanage. She saw the men crossing the bridge, and she knew there was yelling. She saw swords. She heard some gunfire. She said, "This is not good." So she brings 107 children to an old brick kiln that was near the property. She brought them all there, and she's counting. Everybody's counting, and she recognizes there's 2 that are missing, and they were toddlers. She runs back into the orphanage, finds the 2 toddlers who were hiding. She gets them in her arms, and she brings them out, and she's running through the courtyard of the orphanage while she's being fired at by the Egyptians. Twists her ankle, falls into a ditch. There was a ditch close by. She gets them, covers them until the men had passed long enough to then run into the kiln with the other children and the other widows in order to stay safe. That wasn't the only thing. There was more mobs that would show up. And they took Lillian to be British, even though she was American. She was trying to explain she's American. Another time they came and knocked on her door, a different mob. And they were getting ready to kill her. And a neighbor, Egyptian neighbor, came and said, "Stop. You need to leave her alone." Of course, the leader of the mob then takes his sword and puts it at this man's belly, saying, "Why are you going to stand up for her?" He said, "Because she's taking all of our Egyptian babies, all the orphans, and caring for them. Leave her alone." The neighbor stood up to this mob, to where inexplicably, the mob turns around and they leave. Leaving the orphanage, leaving Lillian alone. In the aftermath of all of the British occupation, when it was dangerous for the foreigners to be there, the British government said all the foreigners need to leave. She said, "Why do I need to leave? I'm not fighting. I'm not doing anything. I'm caring for over 100 children. I need to stay here." And the British said, "No, you can take it up with the colonel in Cairo, but